So welcome back to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is episode 9 of our weekly episodes, and we're unleashing the power of understanding to build bridges and not boxes, because we understand that communication is the soil in which teamwork grows. And this week I want to talk about feedback culture. This is so important, particularly in business, but in all of our lives, that in any kind of setting where there's a team or a group, we need to be looking for feedback and seeking feedback so we can grow. And we can build a lifestyle of constructive input. So let's look at what feedback is and then how it can benefit us. And there are 2 types of feedback that I want to focus on. The first would be affirming feedback, because every one of us needs affirmation in order to grow. Affirming feedback is where you spot somebody doing something that's great, that's right, that's good, and telling them that you've seen that. And so first off, it encourages us in the ways that we excel. So when we can encourage one another in the qualities each one has that are excellent or that benefit others, I really appreciate the way that you think deeply before you speak. Or I really appreciate the way that you always seem to be welcoming, no matter how busy you are when I show up. Or I really appreciate how you're courageous and you tackle things head on and you get things done. That kind of encouragement really goes beyond thank you, and it calls out the character of a person that's deserving of the thanks. So you're not just thanking for a specific event or a specific action, but you're speaking deeper than that. You're affirming the character that's behind the action. And it gives voice to the great things that we see in one another, the characteristics that each of us have that make us a gift to the people around us. So train yourself to look for what is it in my circle of friends or in my teamwork at work, my colleagues in the business. What is it that I see in each one that's of tremendous value to the rest of us? And see if you can affirm that with affirming feedback. The second kind of feedback is constructive feedback. This is where we encourage one another in growth, in the ways that we can improve, in the things that would do better if we were to change them slightly or to adapt them to a setting. Now, it's important you hear me on this, that this is going way beyond just pointing out problems or the actions that we think should be different. I'm going beyond that with constructive feedback because I want to get to the character that impacts those actions. And so I want to call someone into something greater because I believe they've got something greater inside of them. So I'm acknowledging and I'm calling out areas for growth that is going to benefit the person that I'm giving that constructive feedback to. None of us want to be the kind of person who's known for criticizing and pointing out faults only. But all of us would benefit from growing the skill of being able to speak to somebody's character and call it to step up to a higher level by changing something or by adding something that will increase their impact and bring out the best in that person. So constructive feedback very often follows affirming feedback. Once I've trained myself to look for what's good in you, then I can also see what could be better in you, and I need to look for ways to be able to call that out of you so that you benefit. So those are the 2 types of feedback I want to zero in on. But let's talk now on a practical level of how do we give feedback? What do we do? What's required for feedback to be effective? And the first thing I want to say is that feedback, good feedback, helpful feedback, takes high courage. You've got to find courage in yourself to go beyond the day-to-day, to say the hard things even though they're hard to say. Particularly with constructive feedback, it's difficult to form it and frame it in a way that a person can receive it. That's why communication coaching is so important, to learn how to connect with a person so you can give them constructive feedback. But there has to be high courage in my feedback in order for it to be valuable to the person that I'm giving it to. There also needs to be high consideration. I mustn't give feedback out of frustration. I mustn't give feedback out of annoyance. Instead, I need to speak the truth, but with love as the foundation, because relationships are far more important than issues that we may see in one another. And so I've got to make sure I'm caring about the person enough to give them the feedback in a way that they can receive it and it can become part of them so that they can grow. The third high, if you like, is that feedback has to be given with high preference. I've got to place the other person's rights above my own. Again, this is not a question of reacting in the moment. This is something I'm going to give time to preparing so that it's more valuable. I'm fighting for another person rather than fighting for myself. I'm fighting for you to get that thing you want, for you to grow into that person that you can become, for you to build on what you've already achieved and become more of who you're meant to be. So high preference is vital. And following right on from that, the fourth requirement for helpful feedback is that it needs to be given with high honor. I want to know someone's character before I give them feedback. So I'm not nagging them or pointing out their faults, but I'm defending their character from an action that I see that's uncharacteristic. So I see this in you, and it surprised me because it's not who I know you to be. But I think if you change this or address that, then you can grow into even more of what I see in you. I'm calling out what I see and calling you to take a step higher, to accept the challenge to be better than you already are, because I believe in you, because I see the best in you, because I want the best for you. And how can we make feedback easier to receive? The key is to seek feedback. This is something that doesn't come naturally to any of us because we don't like people to tell us something they see in us that's not as good as it could be. But my goal is always to consistently seek feedback. And if we can create a culture in our friend group or in our work group, or in the retail store that you lead, or whatever it might be, if we can create a culture that's safe for everyone to seek feedback from those around them, to ask for feedback. What could I do better? I'm thinking of a situation, my wife and I lead a church, and there's a young man who leads worship for us on a Sunday, and he's got a lot better than he used to be at leading. And yet the reason he's got a lot better is that he's learned to seek feedback. He knows he can be better than he already is. He's confident that he can improve because he's been improving. And so he'll come to us afterwards and say, what could I do different? What would be better? What would you have to suggest? What went right, but also what could be better next time? Help me learn. And the next question he asked when we give him feedback, and typically the feedback is, most of that was really great, and there's this one little suggestion that could be even better, then he'll follow that by saying, and what else? He's digging for more. He wants us to dig deeper, knowing his character, knowing his heart, wanting the best for him. He wants us to dig deeper to find more feedback that will benefit him further. He's growing dramatically in his communication with a group of people in a public setting to lead them into something special because he's seeking feedback. So I challenge you, first of all, seek feedback from those around you. How well do I give feedback? How well do I hear what you say to me? How can I grow in that? But then secondly, with the people that you are among on a regular basis, look for the best in each one and then seek to structure feedback for each one in a way that enables them to be even better than they are. Bring honor, bring preference, bring consideration, but have courage to both seek and give feedback. Your communication will grow for it. And your communication mastery is what really matters to me. That's why we get together like this every week and do these podcasts together. So I encourage you, invest in your communication. If you've got questions, if you've got challenges, if you've got things you'd like me to address in future episodes, go to my website at markburlinson.com, use the feedback form and give those inputs to me, because I like feedback too. I don't get as much as I'd like. So please give me feedback. What would you like to hear? What would you like me to address? I'd be glad to look at those things in future episodes. And for now, you could help somebody else. Who do you know who's good at giving feedback? Maybe text them a link to this episode so they can get even better. Who do you know who would benefit from being able to receive feedback? Here's a low threat way for you to encourage them in that. Text them a link and say, hey, I listened to this podcast and I think you might enjoy it. You're not going to say to them, hey, you need to receive feedback. But as they listen to this, well, until they get to the end, they'll realize that's why you did it. But to have courage, send them a link now. And we'll see you back here next week.